This is Gemara in Nazir Daf Nun Aleph, and we pick it up in an Aleph Amid Aleph on the top line, continuing the discussion of the different entities that a Nazir could touch in which he would become Tameh, thereby destroying his Naziris, requiring Tiglachas him to shave, bring the Karbanos, and to start his Naziris anew. So one of the entities that we spoke of in the Mishnah was the dust of the corpse of the mace. So says the Gemara on the top line of Nun Aleph Amid Aleph, Tanu Rabbanan. Ezeu meis yesh loy rekev meis. What is yesh loy rekev? Excuse me. What is the case of a mace in which there is the din of rekev, which is the din of the dust of the mace, which is the quantity of a ladleful, said the Mishnah, that when I have a ladleful of the dust of the mace, what happens when I have a ladleful, of the dust of the mace? What happens is that it makes the Nazir Tameh. Says the Gemara on the top line, the case is mace shenikbar arum, a mace that was buried undressed, ba'aroin shel shayish, in a casket of marble, oyal gabe ritzba shel avonim, or on ground of stones. Zehu meish yesh lo rekev. This is the din of a mace that has a rekev, that has the dust of the mace. Because if the mace is buried undressed in a marble casket or on stones on the ground, then when the mace decomposes and I have a ladleful of quantity of the dust of the mace, that quantity is pure mace dust, pure corpse dust. Whereas, says the Gemara 3 lines down at Aleph and Aleph, if nikbar biksusai, if the mace is buried in his clothing, ba'arin shal eitz, in a casket of wood, oyal gabi ritzol shal levanim, or on a ground of bricks, zehu mace she'ein loy rekev. There's no din of rekev. Why is there no din of the dust? Because now the mace, now this dust that we have is going to be a mixture of the clothing that decomposed, the wood that decomposed, the bricks that decomposed, and thereby it's not pure ladle full of dust, and there will be no din of the rekev, the dust of the corpse, and it will not be metameh the Nazir. And Amar Ula adds on, ein rekev. There's no din of rekev of this dust. Ella haba min habasar umin hagidim umin ha'atzamis. Says Ula, a second qualification. Not only does it have to be pure maize, pure corpse, without any clothing, wood, or whatever not decomposed mixed in. Says Ula, it has to have 3 entities of the mace. It has to have basar, the flesh, the gidim, the sinews, uminat samais, and the bones. Only when I have all 3, then I have the din of rekev, that the dust will transmit Tumah. Asks the Gemara, says in a Braisa, rekev abba min basar tahar. If I have rekev dust just from the basar, just from the flesh, then it's tar. What's the obvious implication? Says Rava, ha mina etzem tameh. The implication is if there's bone there, bone and flesh, it's going to be tameh. Bone and flesh, it's going to be tameh. Afal gav, hamina etzem tameh. It sounds like if it's just bone, it's tameh. Afal gav deleka basar, even though there is no flesh. You Ula just said, you'd have all 3 basar, gidim, and atzamais. But from the Braisa, it seems clear that if it's just basar, then it's tahar. It's not metame. Sounds like if it's just etzem, just bone, it's yes metame. Answers the Gemara, answers Ula, ima hachi rekev haba min abasar tahar. No, you have to change the wording of the Braisa. It means if the rekev comes from the basar, if the rekev comes from the basar, then it's tahar, and until shish etzem bi basar, till there's also bone. But ask the Gemara, 1 second, what about the third entity? Haleka gid, and there are no sinews. So now answers the Gemara, if I have bone, if I have flesh, efshar lebasar ulatzamot belo gidim. Once I have bone and flesh, it must be that there's going to be sinew as well, because anytime I have flesh and bones of the corpse, there's going to be gidin as well. So part 2 is, number 1, it has to be pure corpse. Number 2, it has to be pure corpse of basar gidim and atzamos, flesh, bones, and sinews. Continues the Gemara, Amar Rav Shmuel bar Abba. Says of Shmuel bar Abba, about 12 lines into Nun Aleph Amar Aleph, first one line is bar Abba, Amar Rav Yechlan. Shnei meisit shekavrin zeh im zeh. Now another case to qualify further when we have rekef. If I have 2 mesim that are buried together, nasu galgalin zeh lozeh, then the halach is they become galgal, they become mixed together, and therefore it's not a din of rekef. Rekef is only going to be when it's pure from one mace. But says Shmuel bar Abba, name Rav Yochanan, if I have 2 meisim buried together, so now they decompose, the dust is all mixed together, galgalin zeh, there's no din of rekef. So Masir Rav Nasan asks Rav Nasan from the Brisa that says rekef abami beis meisim tamei. Brisa says rekef from 2 meisim is tamei. How are you telling me it's not? Amar Rava, that's not a kasha. Because over there, shekavru zebif ne'atzmai v'zebif ne'atzmai, each one was buried separately, and then v'erkivu v'amdu al malei ta'arveid rekev. Then they decomposed, and together they equal the ladle full. Then it's matamei, because each one is its own corpse dust. Now a half ladleful and a half ladleful will combine, but that's not the din of Rav Abba, the name of Rav Yochanan. The din of Rav Shmuel bar Abba, the name of Rav Yochanan, is that if they decompose together, then there's no din of rekev. Continues the Gemara, Amar Rabba, Bar Chana, Amar Rav Yochanan. Gazaz sayroi v'kivrayim hai. If they shorn the hair, clip the hair, cut the hair of the mace, and buried it together with the mace, nasla galgalin, that as well becomes a galgal, this mixture, and there's no din of rekev, because again, rekev, pure mace. If there's hair that decomposed, there's no din of mace purely, because there's hair as well, and therefore there's no din of rekev. Asks the Gemara, Tanan also, we learned in the Mishnah, Kol shebemeis tamei, chutz, any part of the mace is metamei, chutz min hashinayim, except for the teeth, vaseir, and the hair, vatzipar, and the nails, ubeshas chiburam, but when they're attached, kulan tamein. If I have a mace that has nails, hair, one not attached to the mace, if I touch the hair of the mace, it's still metame. But the entity, once it's detached, then it's not metame, similar to the din that we just learned, that if it decomposes together with the mace, there's no din of rekev. Continues the Gemara, about 20 lines to the bottom. The first one line is kulan tamein, ba'i Chizkiah. Ask Chizkiah on this din, if I have hair that's about to be cut off, and this is really a fundamental shayla that we have in many areas, as we'll point out in a moment. See, is a nail that's about to be cut off. What is the status in the halacha of such an entity? And the Gemara explains, do we say that anything that's about to be cut off has the halachic status as if it's cut off, and therefore it's considered disconnected and will not be metame, and as well it will not create the din of rekef? Or do we say lamaisa, it is attached? It's a similar halacha we have in Hilchos Nida. If there's a nail that one's about to cut off, do we say the nail is about to be cut off? So it's as if it's cut off, but it's sitting on your finger, so it's going to be a chatzitza, it's going to block the tefillah. Because you have something, it's like a band-aid on your finger. A halacha that goes and permeates all of halacha. Shabbos we have it as well, etc. Says the Gemara, let's answer Chizkiah. Let's answer Rabbi Rav Chana that what time misham de gazas. In the case of Rabbi Rav Chana, that he said that hair, once it's cut off, is considered a separate entity. It's a galgal, and it's no din of rekev. Seemingly, it's because it's gazaz, it's cut off all like gazaz. Loi, if it's not cut off, then no. So seemingly, what do we see? Even if it's made legs, it's still not be considered cut off. Answers Gemara, no raya, hachi kamar gazaz, I raise a galgalin. Loi gazaz, if it's not cut off, then mi baile, then it is a shayla. We don't have an answer, so you can bring a raya from that brisa. And from here we go on to a bunch of shaylas Just like we didn't answer that shayla of Chizkiah, a few more. So, Bayi Rav Yirmiyah rekev abba min eikev mahu. What is the status of the rekev, the dust of the heel of the mace? What's the shayla? Ki gamrin rekev abba mikulei mace. Do we say there's only din of rekev if it comes from the entirety of the mace, the entirety of the corpse? Avdasi min ekev lo, if it came just from the heel, no. Or maybe there's no difference. Now, why the heel particularly? Why not the hand? The reason is that the heel is considered dead skin. So ask the Gemara, maybe the rekev, the dust that comes from the heel, that's a different din. Maybe there's no din of rekev because it was already dead prior or not. So Tashema, the Gemara tries to answer the question. Tani Rav Nasim Rav Aishia rekev abba mishnei meisim, as we saw, two different meisim tamei. If you're going to tell me that which comes from the heel, lie. It's not added to the din of rekev, this ladle full of corpse dust. Zilacha dilma derech ekev kasi. So then over here as well, you should not have a din of tama because maybe part of the dust came from the hail. Va'acha dilma derech ekev kasi. Meaning, if I have a ladleful that came from two different corpses, they should not combine. Why should they not combine? Because each one has a little bit from the heel. The fact that they combine must be that the heel is included in this din of rekev. Says the Gemara, no, Raya, 8 lines from the bottom, eat the irkav kulei meis, v'kasi derech ekev achinami. Says the Gemara, if the kulei meis is irkav decomposed, v'kasi derech rekev, and then there's also part of the heel, achinami, it's going to all be considered together. What was our shayla lahachaki going to irkav chad either because he derech ekamai? We're discussing when there's only one limb near the heel that's decayed, creating this dust. What is the din? And says the Gemara, we again have no answer to this shayla of Rav Yirmiyah Teku. Says the Gemara. Continues the Gemara, Bayi Rav Yirmiyah, 5 lines from the bottom, another shayla of Rav Yirmiyah. Ubara b'mei isha. What is the status of an ober? If a woman, Rahman al-Islan, is nifter with an ober inside of her, the body decomposes. Now when I have this ladle full of corpse dust, part of that is what? Is from the ober. So do we say, have a galgalim? It's considered a mixture, and therefore it's not a din of rekev, it does not metame, oiloi or not. Why not? Kiv, oiloi or not. So answers the Gemara, let's define a little further. That the fetus is considered the thigh, literally it's part of the mother. So that would be a svart to say it's part of her guf, it's the woman's body itself. So of course it's a din of Tomar, it's not considered a mixture. Delmore, perhaps, given the Sefer Latte, since it's going to come out of the body, Mifrash, Parish, Minei, it's considered detached, separate from the body, and therefore it is considered a mixture. The Gemara continues, on the last line, if you're going to tell me the case of Ober, in this case of the fetus, that it's considered detached, and therefore if the fetus and the mother decomposes, there's no din of Rakev because it's considered one entity. That got two entities, they got mixed together. But asks the Gemara, maybe that's only by the case of the Ober. But says the Gemara as we turn over to Nun Aleph Amabei, Shechva Zera b'meisha mahu. A woman is nifter and she has some zera inside of her, and then that also decomposes. So now the decomposed, the ladle full is corpse, woman, and the zera. What's the story? Mi amrina, do we say kivan deloy itzar ki gufei dami? Do we say that since it's not yet the actual ober, so it's considered part of her body, it's like any other fluid of her body, so it's considered a guf, and therefore, yes, combines to be rekev and to be metame or dilma? No. Kivan de mahal makasi, because Lamaisa came from the outside world. Loi, and the Gemara leaves this again as an unanswered shayla. We continue 3 lines down on Alpha Mebeis, Bayi Rav Papa. Pirsha Ma'u, what is the status? If she has Pirsha, she has something separate inside of her intestines. She has some waste matter, some excrement. What is the status of that? When it decomposes, does it combine to the din of Rakev? Explains the Gemara. Do we say since she cannot live without eating, so the byproduct, the waste, is essential, and therefore sorry about that. So do we say that since she has to eat to survive, therefore chiyusahu, therefore what? Therefore it's considered part of her body, and therefore when it decomposes, it combines to the rekev. Or perhaps, no. Hanami me'almasi. At the end of the day, it comes from the outside world, so we don't know what the status of the excrement in her intestines. Continues the Gemara with a similar shayla 5 lines down. What is the status of her skin? Her saliva and mucus, what's the status? After all these shaylas, what do we do with the zera inside of her? What do we do with the ober inside of her? What do we do with the excrement? What do we do with her skin? What do we do with her saliva? After all of this, says her Shol Barachel Rababa Visal Gedaitu Kolani de Kamar. Have a galgalin. If you're going to tell me that in all these cases everything is considered disconnected from her, so it's galgal, it doesn't have a din of rekev, it's considered a mixture, then rekev dimetame echem mishkachasla. So how do you ever have a case of rekev when it comes to a person? So answers the Gemara with an interesting ukimta. De ashke made to call him. The cases where they gave him palm waters to drink, which flushes his system, so there's no excrement. V'sachya nasha, and they smeared him with a cream to remove all his hair, so there's no hair on him. V'shakla b'mei Tiveria, and they cooked this body in the hot waters of Tiveria, therefore he has no skin. That's going to be the case that you can have a din of rekev if you hold that all these things are considered disconnected from the person. And from here we continue with more halachas of this rekev. Amar Abaye, about 12 lines down. The first one line is Vishalku. Says Abaye Naktina. The following we have a tradition. Halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Meis shetachanoi ein loy rekev. If you grind up the corpse, there's no din of rekev. Says Abaye, rekev is only if the body decomposes on its own. But if you take the body and you grind it up, there's no din of rekev. Asks the Gemara Bailu, what's the status? You grind it up and then it decomposes on its own. Do we say midu taima ella dikar basar v'gidim atzamais v'ika? Do we say that the whole din of rekev is we have sinews and bones, and there is, so therefore there's din of rekev. Or perhaps kibriyasa be'inan v'leka, there's only a din of rekev if when the body in its original form decomposes, and in this case there is not. And on that, again, the answer is the Gemara Teiku. Many unanswered shaylas in today's daf, Nun Aleph Amid Beis. And we continue, says the Gemara, Tani Ula Bar Chanina, the second half of Nun Aleph Amid Beis, approximately 20 lines to the bottom. The first one line is Chanina. Meis Shechasar. If I have a mace that is missing part of the mace, the Rivan over here says it's missing a limb, Ein loy rekev. There's no din of rekev as well. V'loy tfusa. There's no din of tfusa. What is the din of tfusa? The din of tfusa is that if I have a body, if we look at the Rivan over here on the first white line, it quotes a Gemara later on Daf Samachtalim in base that if I have a body that's lying and I want to reinturn the body, I have to take the ground from around it. That's the din of tfusa. But if the mace is missing a limb, there's no such din. And number 3, v'lo shchunas kavarais, which is a din if I find 3 maceim in a field, I have to assume that this is a basic kavarais. And then I have to assume everything in that field is going to be tamei. But says the Gemara, if the mace is missing a limb, it does not have such a din. So after this din of Ula Bar Chanina, Meisvei asks the Gemara on Ula. Lo im Amir. Now this is the end of a Mishnah, then the earlier beginning of this Mishnah it said that there's a difference of the kizayis of a flesh of an alive person from a kizayis of a mace. The Gemara, the Mishnah there in Idias responds, Loi, im amri b'meis, sheyesh le'roiv v'roiba. If there's a din, the Mishnah there wants to say that the din of a mace is not the same thing as chai. You can't equate the two. Why? Because sheyesh le'roiv v'roiva, oymar le'tarved rekev. A corpse has a din of the majority, the roiv of the bones, the roiva, a quarter kav of the bones, the mali tarvid rekev, a ladle full of corpse dust. Toimer b'chai, are you going to equate that to a living person? She'ein loy does not have the din of loy roiv, loy roiva, v'loy mali tarvid rekev. So the Gemara there seems to say you can't equate the two. You can't equate a chai with a mace. So says the Gemara, Heichi Dami, what is this case in this Mishnah on Idias? The Erkev Charever, seemingly the case is that one limb decomposed, the Kavasei Gabe Mace, which is similar by a mace, Afilu Charever, even when one limb decomposes, Iko Rekev. There is the din of Rekev. So from this Mishnah in Idias, the Gemara asks an Ula, you Ula, the Rav Chanina just taught me, if the mace is missing a limb, there's no din of Rekev. But seemingly this din, this Mishnah in Idias, seemingly dictates that there is a din of Rekev even on a limb. Answers the Gemara, you went too far with your diuk. Mika Tani, does it say, ha mace? Doesn't say that. Ha kamash malan, shum mace, yesh loy Rekev, shum chai, ein loy Rekev. Doesn't say that we're equating the cases straight. Rather, it says in concept, the mace is different than the chai. There's no din of rekev till there's yes din of rekev. But it's not saying the actual corpse can in relationship to the chai, and therefore we could equate the iver, etc. And therefore we do not have a shaila on ula. Bai Rava. Continues the Gemara today, the whole din, if we were to label Daf Nun Aleph, is rekev, corpse dust. So, Bai Rava, sure the Goldar system will have a wonderful mnemonic to memorize how Nun Aleph is going to remind us somehow of corpse dust. Bai Rava, Hirkiv Kshuchai v'chazaru meis ma'u. I don't want people to think I don't do the simanim. Maybe I should. It'll help me remember it. But it seems to be an incredible program. Highly recommended for those. So, Bai Rava, Hirkiv Kshuchai. What happens if the body decomposed, decayed while the person was alive, his limb? Then he dies. When do we have the Lachmashasina have Rakav the Erkav Shu Mace? Only when the body decomposed, when the corpse was a corpse, when the person was dead. Or perhaps so right now the person died. So there will be a din of Rakav. So we have this interesting middle level case that the body started decomposing, decaying when the person was alive and then he died. Is there a din of Rakav or not? So 7 lines from the bottom of the Aleph and Beis Tashema, the Gemara proves Lo Yim Amrit. The same Mishnah and Idias. But that this din does not exist by a mace, only exists by a mace, does not exist by a chai. So again, we're medayik. Time yishom chai. Ha mace yishloi rekev. So we have the same. We could deduce from this Mishnah that if a person was dead, even if it was the limb came off during the person's lifetime, but right now he's dead, yishloi rekev. Says the Gemara, no raya mika tani ha mace. Again, Al Kamash Shalani, we learn from this Mishnah in Idias, the Shom Mezi, Shlerekev, Shom Chayin, Lerekev. In the overarching picture, there's no din of Rekev by Chai, there is din of Rekev by Mace. You can't bring a Raya. And once again, we don't answer the Shaila. We'll pick it up from the Shaila of Rava on the next year. B'siyata Dishim Hayah.